The layer in Photoshop is an essential keyword. And it is even the working philosophy of the software and all Adobe suite. In this video tutorial, we will address this fundamental notion of Photoshop. The basic principle of layers in Photoshop is to superimpose different elements on each other to constitute a photo montage. As can be seen from this example. A layer for each element that composes this photo montage. We have a burger, a title, etc. In Photoshop, layers are used to perform operations, such as composing multiple images, adding text to an image, or adding shapes to a vector image. A style can be applied to them to add a special effect, like a drop shadow or a glow. Layers may not contain any visible content. For example, an adjustment layer contains color and tone settings that apply to the layers below. Instead of directly modifying the pixels in the image, you can change an adjustment layer and not touch the underlying pixels. This is called non-destructive work, because at any time, we can go back on it as changing our settings. In Photoshop, layers are managed using a panel dedicated to them. The layer panel is certainly one of the most important of Photoshop. It allows you to organize them, modify them, group them, assign marks, add layers, styles. However, before approaching this panel, we must understand how to organize our layers. It is better to understand the different types of layers that Photoshop has. In Photoshop, there are 7 types of layers to learn by heart. First, we have the standard layer. It is used to display any graphic element as an image converted into a layer, graphic drawing, etc. Everything we import in Photoshop is represented as a layer in the layer panel. Whether it is an image, an illustration, a graphic element of some sort, etc. With this little plus, we can create an empty layer that we can fill. Go to the Edit menu, Fill. We can fill it with the foreground color or background color, which are usually found at the bottom of the toolbox. Or fill it with 50% gray. We also have a fill, based on the content aware, that is to say to the photo below. And finally, we can fill it with a solid color. Second, the adjustment layer. The adjustment layer is used to make different adjustments of retouching on a standard layer or our document, such as the brightness, the contrast, the correction of the colors, etc. This type of layer is most used in photo editing and processing because they allow you to work in a non-destructive way on photos. If you remember well, the Photoshop settings we have already discussed, certainly, they are rich and effective, but unfortunately, they are not editable after the assets validate. So, the designers of Photoshop have a choice among these 23 adjustments, a good number of settings reproduced in the form of an adjustments layer, so that they are modifiable at any time. We find them just above the layer panel, in the form of icons, or at the bottom, by this icon. So we have the brightness and contrast adjustment layer, the curve, the levels, etc. In the layer panel, the adjustment layer consists of the setting. It is symbolized in the icon. Each setting has its icon. And just by double-click, it can be changed at any time. Third, the fill layer, as its name suggests, is used to fill a shape, or area, with a solid color, a gradient color, or a pattern. There are 3 types of fill layers that we find with the adjustments layers by the bottom icon. We have a fill with a solid color. Through the color selector panel, I can choose my color easily. A fill by gradient color. A novelty of Photoshop, which we have, a wide library of gradients. However, we can also create our gradient. Just apply a gradient that exists, and then modify it, via these bars. Finally, a fill by pattern. We have some presets, but we can download others. These types of adjustments are usually used by graphic designers, but also by photographers. Of course, by combining other Photoshop options that we will see later. Fourth, the type layer. is a layer containing text that can be changed at will. Everything written by the text tool materializes in the layer panel as an editable layer just by double-click. Fifth, the shape layer contains a vector form that you can change at any time, hence the principle of vectorization. In the toolbox, Photoshop has some vector shapes, such as a rectangle, a polygon. Their creations are very simple, just click and then drag. Graphic designers, etc. generally use its shapes. They materialize in the layer panel, just like the type tool. Sixth, the layer mask is used to hide part of a layer. It is a reversible action. To better explain this type of layer, let's apply a layer to our photo and observe well in the layer panel. For example, choose a hue saturation adjustment layer. We want to change the color of the eyes of this model. We increase from the left or right the color bar as we did with a car photo. It's true, the color of the eyes changes, but with the whole model. And so, the photo is completely sabotaged. Let's leave things as they are and observe our layer. Our adjustment layer consists of two parts. First, we have the setting recognized by its icon. And this blank page is our layer mask. It designates the diffusion mask of this setting. It is in white, that means what is distributed globally on our document or image. To broadcast it only on the eyes. Reverse the mask with the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+I. Our adjustment is off. Go into the toolbox, take the brush tool and check the foreground color, which is on the white. Then, paint on the eyes. The color changes. What's going on? Our adjustment layer was distributed globally. By inverting its layer mask, we distributed it locally via the tools of the toolbox. In addition, that is the great use of layer masks. Seventh, the Smart Object is a type of standard layer transformed to accommodate a reversible action filter, or apply to a photo set to access a free modification at any time. We said that the adjustment layers are the reproduction of the adjustment we have already seen in the menu image. So that we work in a non-destructive way. However, what about Photoshop filters, which we will discuss better in the next videos? To avoid filling the interface with adjustment layers, Photoshop designers created so-called smart objects, an alternative to the layer. Take for example this photo, click to the right of the mouse, and convert it into a smart object. We notice that we have a small icon below our photo. Then we apply a filter. I know it is not the course, it is a little early, but just to understand the notion of smart objects. In the filter menu, we apply the Gaussian blur filter. It is in the blur tab. We have a whole blur list. We choose Gaussian blur. We blur a little our photo, and then we validate OK. In the layer menu, all operations are performed: smart object, filter, Gaussian blur. By double-clicking on the filter, I can change my blur at any time. The same principle of layers.